Good day, we are the Group 1 and we are about to discuss instructional design foundations and applications. By the way, my name is Madeline Guso. Together with me is Ma'am Tablarin and Ma'am Dalion. Instructional design foundations and applications. Okay, now, what is instructional design? Instructional design is the process by which learning products and experiences are designed, developed, and delivered. This is the most familiar of learning design's earlier traditions, foundational part of the profession dedicated to systematically improving the learning and performance outcomes of individuals completing a deliberate course of study. Here are some pictures of 20th century origins. Okay, what was inside in here? During the evolution of instructional media and instructional design, there is already the World War II. During the World War II, there is already demands for a new skilled workforce. The war created an enormous need for rapid training of large number of people to master the complex of technical tasks. The sophistication of new weapons required level of expertise. To address this, they use films and audiovisual technology as their mode of instruction. Now, there is already a development of military training. It was significantly influenced by instructional design principles. The need to efficiently train large numbers of troops quickly and effectively to lead to the application of systematic instructional design methodologies, analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation for the military to become responsive to the needs of rapidly preparing for combat. Significant aspects of instructional design during the World War II. We have training films and visual aids. With this, visual aids are very familiar today. So, meaning to say, visual aids was there during the World War II. Second is the structured training programs. Third is the rapid skills development. Fourth is the effective learning strategies. Fifth is the customized training materials. Sixth is the assessment and feedback mechanism. Then number seven is legacy and military training. Now, when we talk about training films and visual aids, these materials were designed to provide essential training on combat tactics, weapon operations, first aid, and other military skills. Meaning to say that during the World War II, it was already there, the training films and visual aids. Why there are training films? It is because it is easier for them to explain how to use the guns, how to use the weapons, and it is easier to use visual aids as part of the instruction for them to analyze and to understand clearly. Next is the structured training programs. This is to be prepared for the challenges of war, meaning to say, aside from the visual aids, they have also training programs for the soldier or for the military personnel to be prepared for the real war challenges. Next is the rapid skills development. This is to meet the specific needs of military personnel, enabling them to quickly acquire the necessary skills for combat readiness. Meaning to say, aside from there is a program, there is also a skills development in order for them to identify where was the lacking, where was the weaknesses, and where was the in need of improvement. Next is the effective learning strategies to optimize information retention and practical application of knowledge. This includes hands-on training, repetition, and reinforcement to ensure the military could apply what they learned in real-world situation. So aside from there is a program, there is also a skills development, there is also a learning strategies in order for them to such real training, in order for them to optimize, in order for them to analyze. They know how to use guns, they know how to use the weapons, and for that, if during the training, if there were many soldiers who are unable to pass the training, meaning to say there is happen the repetition until it will develop, and they become master of that specific weapons and trainings. Next is the customized training materials. These materials were designed to be engaging, informative, and accessible, meaning to say, aside from programs, the trainings, the seminars, there is a training materials for them to analyze, to be more engageable, that there is need of use of weapons in real seminar or trainings. It is because if there is no weapons, and then during the original scene of the war, it is something sometimes difficult. It is because they did not know how to use it. So that's why during the training there is already issued weapons to each of the soldiers personnel or the military personnel. Next is the assessment and the feedback mechanism. Aside from the visual aids, there are also a way of the assessment and feedback mechanism. It is for them to evaluate the effectiveness of training programs. Next is the legacy and military training, which is the last part, meaning to say legacy. It is continuous to influence modern military education and instructional design practices, which up now we are also aware of the military training during their training. There is this what we call process on selection process during the hiring of applicants of military personnel, which though we think that there is a new or a revision of the program or the trainings, we realize that those trainings that we implement as of now is that coming from the World War II models or the World War II practices, meaning to say there is a legacy and military training. I think this is all my part. Mom Tablarin, please take over. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Doc. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Novelin Kismundo Tablarin, your second discussant for today from Group 1. Welcome to Educational Management 207 with the description Design and Evaluation for Instructional Media. I have two topics assigned to be reported. First is System Theory 1940s and Program Instructional Materials. Let's start with System Theory 1940s. In 1940s, psychologists and researchers began viewing training as a system during this period and was influenced by systems engineering. At that time, a significant amount of military training materials were created based on principles related instruction, learning, and human behavior. Adherence to this theory fostered systemic and systematic thinking, providing a basis for solving design problems. Providing a basis for solving design problems, and this system theory laid the groundwork for modern instructional design, emphasizing systematic approaches and holistic thinking. Under system theory is theoretical influence on the development of instructional design is multifaceted and described as theoretical influence in the development of instructional design. It is also multifaceted and promotes effective learning outcomes. It refers to the impact of established theories and models in the design development and delivery of effective educational materials and experiences. There are five key points under theoretical influence in the development of instructional materials. First is behaviorism. Now, the theoretical basis of behaviorism is championed by psychologists like B. F. Skinner, Ivan Pavlov, and John B. Watson. Watson. They emphasize observable behavior and reinforcement. It is applied by breaking down complex tasks into manageable steps and providing immediate feedback for correct response. We have impact on instructional design under behaviorism. Behaviorism influenced early instructional design models, focusing clear objectives, stimulus response, and rewards or punishments in designing effective instruction. The second key point is cognitivism. The theoretical basis of cognitivism, led by researchers like Jean Piaget, emphasize internal cognitive processes such as knowledge acquisition, memory thinking, and problem solving. Now, the impact on instructional design of cognitivism shifted focus to learner cognition, information processing, and conceptual understanding. ID models incorporated with cognitive principles, encouraging active engagement and critical thinking among learners. The third one is constructivism. The theoretical basis of constructivism is associated with Lev Vygotsky and Jerome Bruner. It is a learning theory where the learner constructs knowledge from the information provided. Unlike passive learning, such as memorization, constructivism emphasizes active engagement, problem solving, and exploration. The impact of instructional design of constructivism approaches led to problem-based learning, collaborative activities, and authentic context in instructional design. It has significantly influenced instructional design models and practices, encouraging educators to create dynamic learning experiences that align with learners' cognitive processes. The fourth key point is connectivism. The theoretical basis of connectivism, proposed by George Siemens, focuses on learning in a network digital age. It emphasizes the importance of connections between learners and their network of information sources. Now, the impact on instructional design of connectivism highlights network learning, digital tools, and knowledge dissemination. It influences electronic learning and online course design, and learning is viewed as a network information process where learners activity create or actively create and navigate their learning networks. The fifth key points of theoretical influence is humanism. Now, the theoretical basis of humanism of the influence on instructional design centers on a whole person approach to education. It was developed by Abraham Maslow, Carl Rogers, and James F. in early 1900s. Humanism emphasizes that learners are inherently good and that their needs, both cognitive and affective, should be met their needs of effective learning. The impact on instructional design of humanism in this approach, students are seen as authorities on their own learning, and educational focuses on rational ways to teach the whole child, including social skills, feelings, intellect, artistic abilities, and practical skills. Now, there are important things to remember. That these theories aren't exclusive. They often intersect and inform each other to create effective learning experiences. It informs educators and instructional designers about effective strategies for creating engaging learner-centered experiences. And by recognizing theories like behaviorism, cognitivism, constructivism, and humanism, practitioners can tailor their approaches to meet diverse learning needs and enhance educational outcomes. Now, the second topic that I'm going to discuss is about program instructional materials. It defined as are designed to facilitate self-paced learning or to teach content in step by step. Now, there are two main topics or main types of program instructional materials. The first one is linear programming, defined as this approach presents content in a single straight path, guiding learners through the material sequentially. The second is branching programming. It defined as, in contrast, branching programming allows learners to choose their own path through remedial frames, adapting the learning experience based on their individual needs. These materials can take the form of printed books, recorded tapes, or digital format like teaching machine or computer programs. And there are three important things to remember. The first one is the definition. It is programmed instruction or programmed learning. It involves presenting subject matter in a graded sequence of controlled steps. Learners work through the material independently, assessing their comprehension after each steps through questions. The second important things to remember is the characteristic. We have self-paced. Learners proceed their own speed or can progress at their own rate. It allows individuals to learn according to their abilities and preferences. Next is logical sequence. But it has comfortable and effective learning experience, so we can learn according to their abilities and preferences. We have logical sequence. The instructional materials is logically sequenced and broken into small steps or segments called frames. Now, what is frames? These frames guide the learner through the content in a structured manner, and we have immediate feedback. Learners receive feedback right after responding. It is based on the theory of reinforcement to correct answers and helping them to learn from mistakes. Another is incremental steps. Material is broken down into small manageable chunks. We have the very common assessment. Learners verify their understanding throughout the process and, of course, the observable response. The system emphasizes overt responses that can be observed, measured, and controlled. This makes it easier to evaluate learners' performance. Now, the third important things to remember about program or influence about program instructional materials is the origins, where it is originated. The origin of program instructional materials can be traced back to the middle of 20th century. Behavioral psychologists like B.F. Skinner played a pivotal role in their development, although he experimented with this model in the 1920s and 1930s. It wasn't until the 1950s that he and J.G. Holland began implementing program instructional at Harvard. It can be delivered via printed books, teaching machines, or computer-based. Now remember that programmed instructional materials empower learners to take charge of their learning journey. They allow learners to progress at their own pace. Each student can focus on areas where they need more practice or review, promoting personalized learning experiences. It is also important because this will help enhance learning by providing structure, feedback, and flexibility, reinforcing correct answers, and addressing misconceptions promptly. It enhances learning efficiency, adaptability, and consistency, benefiting both educators and learners. That's all about my report. Thank you for listening and God bless us all.
Hello everyone, my name is Mary Jane Delion, and today we will delve into the early developments in instructional design during the 1960s and 1970s, a pivotal decade that set the foundation for many modern educational practices. We will explore the significant contribution of Robert Glaser and Robert Gagne and the emergence of the systems approach to instructional design. These innovations have not only shaped the way we assess and deliver education, but also how we understand the learning process itself. In the early 1960s, Robert Glaser introduced a groundbreaking concept in educational assessment known as criterion reference testing. This method was a departure from the traditional norm reference test, which compared students to each other. Instead, criterion reference tests evaluated a student's performance against a fixed set of criteria or learning objectives. This shift allowed educators to measure whether each student had achieved specific skills or knowledge rather than how they ranked among their peers. Importance of criterion reference testing. First, specific learning goals. Criterion reference tests, or CRTs, measure student performance against a fixed set of predetermined criteria or learning standards, providing a clear assessment of whether specific learning goals are met. Individual progress. This test focused on individual progress, helping educators identify strengths and areas for improvement without comparing students to each other. Instructional alignment. CRTs ensure that teaching strategies are aligned with the learning objectives, enabling educators to tailor instruction to meet the specific needs of students. Diagnostic tool. CRT serves as effective diagnostic tools, allowing teachers to pinpoint specific skills or knowledge areas where students may need additional support. Objective measurement. These tests provide an objective measure of students' achievement, reducing subjectivity and bias in assessment. Curriculum effectiveness. CRTs help evaluate the effectiveness of the curriculum and instructional methods, informing necessary adjustments to improve educational outcomes. Student motivation. By focusing on meeting set criteria, CRTs can motivate students to master specific skills and knowledge, promoting a sense of achievement and self-efficacy. Feedback and accountability. These tests offer detailed feedback to students, parents, and educators, fostering accountability and a clear understanding of students' progress. Standardization. Standardization. CRTs provide a standardized approach to assessment, ensuring consistency in measuring students' performance across different classrooms and schools. Educational planning. The result from CRTs inform educational planning and policy decisions, aiding in the allocation of resources and the development of targeted intervention programs. Formative and summative use. CRTs can be used for both formative, ongoing, and summative, the end of course assessment purposes, providing flexibility in how they are administered and utilized. The importance of criterion reference testing cannot be overstated. By focusing on the specific learning goals, this method enables more precise assessment and more targeted instructional intervention. Teachers could identify areas where individual students needed more help and tailor their teaching strategies accordingly. This approach also facilitated the development of personalized learning plans, ensuring that each student could progress at their own pace and achieve mastery in each subject area. Robert Glaser's contribution went beyond just concept of criterion reference testing. He emphasized the need for clearly defined learning objectives and robust assessments aligned with these objectives. Glaser's work challenged the prevailing norms of educational assessment and laid the groundwork for a more individualized approach to education. His influence is seen today in practices like formative assessment, where ongoing feedback is used to guide student learning and improve educational outcomes. Around the same time, Robert Gagne was making significant strides in understanding the learning process. Gagne's theory of the conditions of learning was revolutionary in that it recognized learning into different types, each requiring distinct instructional conditions. He identified five major categories: verbal information, intellectual skills, cognitive strategies, motor skills, and attitudes. Gagne's insights help educators understand that different types of learning required different teaching approaches. One of Gagne's most enduring contributions to educational or instructional design is his 9 events of instruction. These events provide a structured framework for creating effective learning experiences. First is gaining attention, capturing the learner's interest and focusing their attention on the lesson. Second, informing learners of the objectives, clearly stating that what the learners will be able to do after the instruction. Third, stimulate recall of prior learning, helping learners remember relevant information they already know. Fourth, presenting the content, delivering the new information in a clear and organized manner. Fifth, providing learning guidance, offering strategies and tips to help learners understand and retain the content. Sixth, eliciting performance, giving learners opportunities to practice the new skills or knowledge. Seventh, providing feedback, offering constructive feedback on learners' performance to reinforce correct responses and correct errors. Eighth, assessing performance, evaluating learners to ensure they have achieved the instructional objectives. Ninth, enhancing retention and transfer, helping learners apply the new knowledge or skills in different contexts and retain it over time. These events guide educators in designing instructions that is both engaging and effective, ensuring that learners achieve the desired outcomes. In the early 1970s also saw a growing interest in the systems approach to instructional design. This approach views instruction as a complex system of interrelated components, including learners, content, materials, and context. By systematically analyzing and optimizing each component, instructional designers can create more efficient and effective educational programs. This holistic view of instruction ensures that all aspects of the learning environment are considered and addressed. The systems approach is characterized by several key features. First, clear objectives. Instructional goals are clearly defined and measurable. Second, detailed analysis. A thorough analysis of learners' needs, the learning context, and the content to be covered. Third, iterative development. Instructional materials and strategies are developed and refined through repeated cycles of design, testing, and revision. Fourth, continuous evaluation. Ongoing assessment and evaluation to ensure that the instructional program is effective and meets learners' needs. This approach has become a cornerstone of modern instructional design, providing a systematic method for creating high-quality educational experiences. The contribution of Robert Glaser and Robert Gagne, along with the adaptation of the systems approach, have had a lasting impact on the field of instructional design. Glaser's criterion reference testing has led to more precise and individualized assessments. Gagne's conditions of learning and 9 events of instruction have provided a structured framework for designing effective instruction. The systems approach has ensured that instructional design is a systematic and iterative process, leading to continuous improvement in educational practices. In conclusion, the early 1960s and 1970s were a transformative period for instructional design. The criterion reference testing movement, Gagne's conditions of learning, and the rise of the systems approach laid the foundation for modern instructional practices. These innovations have improved our ability to create effective, personalized, and systematic educational experiences. As we continue to develop new educational technologies and methodologies, the principles established during this period remain central to our efforts to enhance learning outcomes. Thank you for joining me in this journey through the history of instructional design. I hope you found this presentation informative and engaging. Goodbye.